Welcome back to GBGuns. We've got the new Canik in, doing the tabletop look, coming up next. So this is the Canik or Canik TP9 SA Mod 2 from Century Arms. Notice a couple changes right off the bat, one of which is, in addition to the warranty card and all that, this nice divider preventing all the stuff that's in the case from mashing up against the supplies that are at the top. Taking a look at what all you get in the case aside from the pistol, which we'll get to later, do have a holster. This does still have the retention button, but it's set to not need to be pushed, so you don't risk the danger of things like the Black Hawk Serpa holster. It does have a strap that's removable for absolute retention, but the holster holds the gun in pretty well. That's nice. We have a back strap here, a second back strap, wedged tightly in this foam. This one's a little bit larger to give you a little more push in the heel. A second Metgar magazine with witness windows on the back, where I like them. 18+1 round capacity. You get a speed loader, your lock, and this is a nice touch. In this little baggie here is a punch for driving out the pin that holds your back strap in place. Up top, we have our owner's manual, the paddle for that holster, which you notice from these indentations here is adjustable for different angles. You get a plastic cleaning rod and a soft brush with a cap tip. Nice detail there. Not necessarily required, but certainly nice to have in a handgun, especially at the prices that these go for. The manual is for the original SA. This is an SA Mod 2. Full color photos. Photos are a little grainy, but they are full color. That's nice. Also some basic instructions and the complete breakdown and parts list. Let's get this packaging out of the way and we'll take a look at the pistol. One more note on that holster before I forget. It does its retention on the trigger guard, not by squeezing on the frame, which means you should have minimum frame wear, but of course this nice FTE Cerakote is probably going to last pretty well through that anyways, but it is a nice feature for the holster. So the Mod 2, what's different about it? Well, they've flattened out the top, as is popular on the SF model and the DA model, and the decocker is now just on the left side, similar to its original inspiration, the Walther P99. How it stacks up with other Caniks, I don't have an original SA to compare it against. I have a DA and an SF Elite, but looking at it with the DA, you notice that muzzle's a little bit longer. That's going to get you some more velocity, better performance out of the ammunition. This does have the aftermarket sights that Century stocks already installed on it. We'll look at these sights later, but I just wanted to mention that as a difference. And then here's the SF Elite, which is the compact 15+1 in comparison to the 18. And you can see once again, we've got that longer muzzle there. So that's how it compares against those. I'll get these out of the way. Let's take a look at this gun. So of course we'll start off by showing clear. We do have a loaded chamber indicator that is flush, that pops up when loaded. I like those because it's nice to have something that's both visual and tactile to be able to feel in the middle of the night or darkness, or just reach down to a holster, immediately identifying if there's a round in the chamber or not. The magazine, we'll see if it ejects or releases. Do have a little bit of ejection there. That's a preference of mine, to have it kick out in case things get a little gritty. As I mentioned before, we have numbered witness windows 18 rounds, and these are made by Mekgar. So now we can see, obviously, that the chamber is clear. Let's take a look around the gun. Starting on the business end, slide to frame has a little bit of play, but not too much, probably just enough to keep things reliable. We do have a bit of a taper to that front sight post there to reduce drag. I like this taper on the front of the muzzle. That could be used for press checks. I'd probably just end up grabbing back here. We don't have any slide serrations up front. This cut, somewhat reminiscent of the Smith & Wesson cut. Our rail has 3 slots. We've got texturing on the front of the trigger guard for the folks that like to run their finger up there. And these nice texture pads on both sides. Well, here it's texture, here it's the Made in Turkey index spot for your trigger finger when you're not shooting. It's a good memory point. Taking a look at our trigger, we have the safety doohickey. Trigger won't move without that centerpiece depressed. And speaking of trigger, let's take a look at it. Comes to a wall, moves a little further. Nice clean break. Reset. Very short. Audible, not so tactile. And a clean break again. This is one of those guns that could be learned to shoot quickly very easily. Controls for my hand are easily in reach. Slide catch and magazine release. Have this nice depression here to give your thumb a rest. On the other side to give your finger some reach. With the installed backstrap in my large hands, it is easy for me to properly place my finger on the trigger. Nice and clean there. We've got some serrations on the front strap, texturing on the side. You can hear it's a little rough, but not sharp. Texturing on the back strap. I love this narrowing they do back there that fits right about where my palm meat wants to swell. Makes the gun a little more comfortable. And as you can see, I'm at no risk of a finger pinch with the magazines on this grip. Here's our sight picture. It's a U-notch rear and very bright white dot up front. Makes it pretty easy to see. We do have a striker indicator. Protrudes in red when the gun is armed, cocked. Slide to frame fit in the rear is nice and tight. And on the right side of the gun, we don't have any controls. Magazine release appears to be reversible. Next, let's field strip this and take a look inside. So, field stripping the Canik TP9 SA Mod 2 is just like most other striker-fired guns these days. Check for clear. We're going to pull down on these tabs on both sides. They're nice and broad and square. Pull the trigger, back on the slide a little bit, and the slide comes right off. Looking in our frame construction is very Walther-esque. If you're not familiar with them, the TP9 series is basically a clone that started with the Walther P99 and then integrated some PPQ qualities to it, giving you something that's sort of in the middle and a lot more affordable. There's our guide rod. It is heavy metal. I like the weight because that helps keep the muzzle down. A lot of the Glock boys will pay a lot of money to get a metal guide rod of this weight and heft put in their gun so that they can shoot a little bit flatter, so that's a good sign. It's not fluted, but squared through the center. This is interesting. Minimizes surface contact between the spring and the rod, which should make for smoother cycling, and it is a flat coil spring. Dropping the barrel. Take a look at that in a minute. We can see some of that shine you're seeing in there is some of the factory oil. Cerakoted inside and out. Rather simple and clean construction. See if I can get some of the factory firing out of there. Very matte. barrel is a bit longer than on the other TP9s that I showed you. That's of course going to provide some more velocity. We have a polished feed ramp that's nice and broad, offset at a slight angle. And to check our chamber fit, we're of course going to use our nozzler match as always. Drop around in there, and as you can see, we have full chamber support, which is great for those running reloads where the brass may be weaker or chance of a hot load. You know your brass isn't going to blow apart inside the gun. That's why I always look for that. So, overall first impressions, construction looks good as we've come to expect from Canik and Century. Controls are friendly. What about that SA? Well, the SA is single action. You can see that it's cocked here. Up top we have a decock, which kills the trigger completely. In order to rearm it, we've got to bring the slide back some, and now we're armed again, and we can fire. You might wonder, what's the point? Now, I personally think the DA model gives you more options to go into a double action first shot, but I will say this button is very stiff. It's not going to be hit without intention. You've got to really put some effort onto it, and getting it back into armed striker, you've got to come back about that far, basically a press check, and we're ready to go. So there's no risk of emptying the chamber. It's something that definitely has to be done deliberately and not an accident. Remember when the SAs first came out, everyone was criticizing, could you bump it and disable your firearm? Fire Mountain Outdoors, great YouTube channel if you've ever seen them. They did a great one because everyone was joking about how easy it might be, and there was a lot of internet BS out there. Fire Mountain Outdoors demonstrated that karate chopping it and all those things wasn't going to disable your gun. So it wasn't as bad as the internet lore led it to be, and this one is definitely stiff and not that hard to fix. So nice option. That longer barrel is, like I said, going to give us more velocity, let our ammo do more of what it's supposed to do before it leaves the gun, and also going to give a longer sight radius, which will make shooting accurately a little easier. I'll get this out to the range. We'll do our what's for dinner test, run a variety of loads through it. I'm curious to see what kind of break-in might be needed with this, if any. I know a lot of these Caniks, being that they're generally a military contract gun, are made for NATO 124 grain loads, which in addition to being a heavier projectile tend to also be a little bit hotter of a load, and so sometimes early on they're not happy with 115s, but not always. A lot of people didn't know that, didn't understand that, and so when they first got their TP9s, they were complaining that it wouldn't run. I proved that otherwise in an earlier video. We'll see how this guy does. I'll run 165 grain all the way down to 65 grain after a little bit of break-in, and I will let you know in that video what that break-in required, if it ran out of the box on 115s, or if I needed some 124s to get it going. That'll be the next video. Thanks for watching.